There is a particular kind of tiredness that only a show you have already seen can meet. You do not have to follow anything. You know how the night at the park goes, how the arguments resolve, how Mordecai and Rigby will fail at something small and survive it anyway. And somewhere in that familiar noise there is a sound you have stopped noticing, a soft-pitched laughter that arrives right on cue. The sound of a small white ghost hovering at the edge of the frame, agreeing with whatever Muscle Man has just said. High Five Ghost does not carry the episode. He is not supposed to. He drifts through it the way a fan turns in a warm room, present, steady, asking nothing of you. Let your eyes close. The voices will keep going without you. Tonight is about that quiet figure and the strange, deliberate logic behind him. A character who exists at the very beginning so that a joke would have someone to land on. Think about what that means. To build a friend whose first purpose is to laugh. Welcome to Velvo. Settle into whatever holds you, let the light go low, and let the weight of the day loosen at the edges. There is nothing here you need to keep up with. You can listen, or you can let the words blur into the dark and simply rest. And either one is the right way to be here. Stay as long as you like, and drift whenever you are ready. Before there was a show, there was a problem to solve, and it was smaller than you might expect. J.G. Quintel, the man who would go on to create Regular Show, has said that Muscle Man came first in his planning. The idea he had for that character was narrow at the start. He thought Muscle Man would simply be a guy who gets what people call mom jokes wrong. A man fumbling a familiar joke format and landing it badly on purpose. That was the whole notion. And then Quintel realized something that most beginning writers do not admit to themselves quickly enough, which is that no one would laugh at that alone. A man telling bad jokes into empty air is not comedy. It is just a man in a room. So he built a second character to fix the first one. He created High Five Ghost as the best friend who would laugh at the jokes. Sit with how unusual that is. This is a character who does not begin with a history, or a wound, or a secret. He begins with a function. Somebody had to be in the room to laugh, so that the joke would exist at all. High Five Ghost was, in the plainest sense, the audience made visible. The small figure who turns a private failure into a shared bit. He is a foil in the oldest theatrical meaning of that word. The presence that lets another presence register. That is a strange and honest way to make a person, and it tells you something about how Quintel worked. By his own description, his design process for the whole of Regular Show was not what people imagine when they picture a creator inventing a world. He has said that he pulled from designs and characters he had already made for his student films, and combined them, rather than building each figure from scratch off a backstory. Nothing arrived fully formed with a tragic past attached. Instead, there were shapes he already trusted, pieces he had drawn before and knew how to move, and he assembled them into what the series needed. The character came out of the craft, not out of a biography written in advance. What a scene required is what a character became. This is a quieter philosophy of creation than the one we usually celebrate, and I find it more truthful than most. We like to believe that good characters are discovered, unearthed like something that was always there. Quintel's method suggests the opposite. A character can be a solution to a comedic gap, a body placed exactly where a laugh needs to live, and still becomes something people love for years. The backstory, if it ever comes later, and it comes to serve a joke that was already working. That is a builder's way of thinking, and Regular Show is a builder's show. There was one detail Quintel did carry in his head with real specificity, and it was not a life story. It was a sound. He has stated that he had a particular idea for how he wanted High Five Ghost to sound. He wanted him to be, in his words, really ghostly. To get there, the voice was pitched and then run through a computer filter, processed until it stopped sounding like a person and started sounding like an apparition. Consider the ordering of that. The character's inner life was left open, undefined, free to be whatever a scene asked for, but the texture of his voice was fixed and deliberate. Quintel knew exactly what the ghost should sound like before he knew, or needed to know, who the ghost was. The surface was designed with care while the depths were left to fill themselves in. All of this was happening inside a very particular kind of opportunity, one that made this looseness possible. Regular Show began as Quintel's pitch short for Cartoon Network's Cartoonstitute, an anthology initiative meant to let creators make shorts without network executive interference or focus testing. That last part matters more than it sounds. No committee was standing over the drawing table asking who High Five Ghost was, or demanding a document that explained his motivation, or running him past a room of children to measure a response. A creator was allowed to make a thing because the thing amused him, and to figure out the rest by making it. A character built to laugh at another character's jokes survives in exactly that environment, and might not survive in a more anxious one. The short went out into the world on Cartoon Network's website on the 14th of August, 2009, part of the Cartoonstitute lineup, and the network responded quickly. The same month, Cartoon Network greenlit 12 quarter-hour episodes, a pitch that had been made freely, without the usual machinery of approval. Turned into a series order in a matter of weeks. The looseness had worked. There is a small footnote to the Ghost's beginnings that I think is worth sitting with, because it shows how provisional even a finished character can be. In his official debut episode, the one called Just Set Up the Chairs, which came in 2010, High Five Ghost was not voiced by Quintel at all. He was voiced by Jeff Bennett. Only afterward did Quintel take over the role and voice the character for the remainder of the series. So the man who invented the ghost, who knew precisely how ghostly he should sound, did not originally speak for him. He arrived at that too, the way he arrived at everything else, by working the thing until it settled. And once it settled, it stayed with him in a way that closed a quiet loop. Quintel voices both Mordecai and High Five Ghost. The same person supplies the voice for one of its two leads, and for the small floating figure who was first imagined only as someone to laugh at a friend's bad joke. The central character and the character built to be a supporting presence share a single throat. There is something fitting in that, though Quintel has never framed it as anything grand. It is simply where the building led. Consider what it means for a show to know an answer and choose, deliberately, never to give it. Regular show does this with High Five Ghost. It runs for 8 seasons, and across all of them it never states plainly whether he was born a ghost or whether he died and became one. His nature is left open on purpose. This is not an oversight, not a detail the writers forgot to fill in. It is a decision held consistently, and the evidence the story does offer only deepens the question rather than settling it. Start with the earliest life we are shown. In the Season 4 premiere, Exit 9B, a flashback places High Five Ghost in infancy. He is a baby, held by a mother figure who appears human, and he is already a ghost. Already translucent, already the small floating thing he will be as an adult. Think about what that image does to the question of his origin. If he was a ghost as an infant, cradled by a woman who looks alive, then either he was born this way, or he died so young that there was no living version of him anyone would remember. The show hands you a picture that seems like an answer, and is not one. A ghost baby, held by a human mother, resolves nothing. It only makes the mystery older. Then the family widens. In See You There, from Season 2, we learn that High Five Ghost is not alone in what he is. He has a ghost father and a ghost brother, and the brother has a name, Low Five Ghost, which tells you the family thinks of itself in matched pairs, high and low, one and then the other. A whole family made of ghosts. On its surface, this pushes toward the simplest reading. If the father is a ghost, and the brother is a ghost, and the child is a ghost, perhaps this is just a species, a kind of being that is born and lives and continues as it is, no death required. A family of ghosts, the way another family might be a family of people. That reading is available, and it is tidy, and the writers refuse to let it stay tidy. Because in that same episode, See You There, the father is given a very particular piece of knowledge. He is established as the only member of the family who knows how to turn someone who has become a ghost back into their living form. Sit with the phrasing, someone who has become a ghost. The father knows how to reverse a transformation, which means transformation is a thing that happens in this world. People become ghosts. There is a before and an after, and the father holds the key to moving between them. So the family of ghosts is not simply a species that was always this way. Ghosthood, in the logic of the show, is at least sometimes a state you arrive at, a change you undergo. And the very man who could reverse it is the boy's own father. Whether he ever did, whether High Five Ghost is a natural-born ghost or a reversed or unreversed once-living child, the episode does not say. It gives you the mechanism and withholds the case. Now bring in the way the character behaves around death, because the series is careful here too. In Trucker Hall of Fame, from Season 3, Muscle Man needs help spreading his late father's ashes, and Benson has to decide who goes. He does not send High Five Ghost. Benson says, in effect, that High Five Ghost takes death badly, and that is the stated reason he sends Mordecai and Rigby instead. Consider how strange and how deliberate that is. A ghost, a being most stories would treat as death's own representative, its resident expert, its comfortable native, is the one character kept away from a funeral errand because death unsettles him. If he were simply born a ghost, at peace with his nature, you might expect him to be the calm one, the one who could stand beside grief without flinching. Instead, the show gives him a wound around mortality. That is the kind of detail that points quietly toward a death he cannot easily face. It is not proof, it is a lean. The writers keep leaning and never land. And then, against all of that weight, regular show sets a life that is almost aggressively ordinary. In Newbro on Campus, from Season 6, a flashback shows High Five Ghost attending a regular human high school alongside Muscle Man. Not a ghost school, not an afterlife, a normal high school full of living teenagers. He owns a car, He enters a nacho eating contest. These are the details of an ordinary adolescence, the texture of a kid who belongs to the human world completely. The episode even tells us where he is from. Wichita, Kansas. A real place. A specific place. The sort of hometown you give a character to make him feel grounded and mortal and small. A ghost from Wichita who drives to school and eats nachos with his friends. The contest itself is the series' finest joke about all of this, and it is a joke that doubles as evidence. High Five Ghost wins the nacho eating contest. By most accounts, he ends up winning the contest almost by default, since as a ghost he never really needed a stomach to begin with. He cannot lose an eating contest because there is nothing inside him for the food to go. In one gag, it confirms, plainly and physically, that even in high school he was already a ghost. He had no stomach then. So the ordinary human adolescence and the ghost nature are not two different chapters of his life, a living time and then a dead time. They are the same chapter. He was a ghost at that human high school, a ghost with a car and a hometown and a friend, winning a contest by being hollow. The show fuses the mundane and the spectral so completely that you cannot pry them apart to find the seam where a death might have happened. That same episode gives the friendship its origin. After a drag race ends in a crash, High Five Ghost saves Muscle Man's life. This is where the two of them begin, in a wreck survived. And notice the shape of it. The ghost is the one who pulls the living boy back from death. The being whose own relationship to dying the writers keep so carefully unresolved is, in the founding moment of his closest friendship, a rescuer, an interrupter of death. The reason another person did not die that day. Whatever happened to High Five Ghost, whatever he is, the story casts him at least once as the thing that stands between a friend and the end. One more thread from the world outside the show. High Five Ghost's father, the one family member who knows how to return a ghost to living form, is voiced by Mark Hamill. The production reached for an actor whose voice carries a certain gravity in history, and placed him precisely on the character who holds the family's one secret about crossing back from death. It is a small casting choice, and I think it is a telling one. The keeper of the reversal spell is given the most recognizable voice in the family. It treats that knowledge as something worth wait. So here is what you are left with, lying awake and turning it over. A ghost baby in a human mother's arms. A family of ghosts. A father who can undo ghosthood, which means ghosthood can be done. A grown ghost who cannot handle death. A human high school. A car. A hometown in Kansas. A stomach he does not have. A crash survived and a friend saved. Every piece of evidence points somewhere, and no two pieces point the same way. And the show that assembled them all knew exactly what it was doing. It could have told you. It had the flashbacks, the family tree, the mechanism, the means. It chose the mystery instead. And what that choice says about regular show is that some things in the background of a life are meant to stay in the background. Not because the answer is unknown to the world, but because the not knowing is truer to how we actually hold the people beside us. You do not know how everyone you love came to be what they are. You float alongside them anyway. There is an episode where a birthday party becomes the site of a small, strange lesson in how the world of this show is built. And most people who watch it come away remembering the prank rather than the family tree. The episode is called See You There from the second season, and its occasion is High Five Ghost's birthday. That alone is worth pausing on. High Five Ghost spends most of the run as a background presence, a floating hand attached to a floating head, a friend of Muscle Man who rarely carries a story of his own. And yet here, the series hands him a birthday. And with a birthday comes everything a birthday implies. A father, a brother, a lineage. A set of rules about what a ghost is and how one comes to be one. The trouble begins in the morning, before any of the party's ghosts arrive. Rigby is choking on food. Mordecai performs the Heimlich maneuver on him, and the chewed food that comes flying out splashes soda directly onto Muscle Man's face. It is the kind of small, humiliating accident the series loves. An ordinary act of rescue that produces an absurd insult. Muscle Man does not take it as an accident. He takes it as a grievance. And so when he sets about inviting the entire park staff to High Five Ghost's birthday party, he deliberately leaves two names off the list. Mordecai and Rigby are not welcome. The soda has decided it. Think about what that exclusion sets in motion. In most stories, the uninvited guest is a comic engine, a way to build a plot around sneaking in where you are not wanted. But this show uses the sneaking to introduce something far more interesting than a party crasher. To get past the wall of the party tent, Mordecai and Rigby need help. And the help arrives in the form of a character it has never shown before. His name is Low Five Ghost, and he is introduced here as High Five Ghost's brother. This is his first appearance in the entire run of the series, and it happens softly, folded into the machinery of a break-in, as though the writers wanted his arrival to feel less like a grand reveal and more like a fact that had simply always been true. Low Five Ghost is the mirror of his brother in name and in posture. where high five is the raised hand, the upward gesture, low five is the hand held low, the answering half of a pair. And what he can do is the thing that makes the whole episode possible. He turns Mordecai and Rigby into actual ghosts so that they can pass through the wall of the tent and slip inside unseen. It is a casual act of transformation, offered like a favor. And it is here that the episode begins to build the quiet architecture that gives it its real weight. Because becoming a ghost in this world is not free. There is a warning attached. Mordecai and Rigby have been turned into ghosts without proper costumes. And because of that, they are told they will be stuck as ghosts permanently if they do not change back soon. Hold that idea a beat, because it reveals how this show imagines the supernatural. Ghosthood is not simply a state you fall into or a punishment handed down. It is closer to a transformation with conditions. A door that closes behind you if you linger too long on the other side. The costume matters. The timing matters. There are rules, and the rules have consequences. And a favor from a friendly brother can become a trap if you are not careful with it. This is the family logic that most viewers miss, and it is doing more work than it appears to. The one who explains the way out is High Five Ghost's father. He is an unnamed character, given no name in the episode, but he is unmistakably the head of this small ghost family. And it is he who tells Mordecai and Rigby the single condition for turning back into themselves. The only way, he says, in effect, is to scare someone. That is the price of return. To stop being a ghost, you must do the one thing ghosts are for. You must frighten a living person, and only then does the transformation reverse. It is a neat and slightly cruel piece of internal logic. And notice how it turns the boys' predicament into a small moral machine. They cannot simply wait it out. They cannot ask nicely. They must commit the defining act of the thing they have become before they are allowed to stop being it. So they scare someone, and the someone is Muscle Man. He is the natural target, the man who left them off the list, the man whose face still remembers the soda. Mordecai and Rigby scare him, and Muscle Man collapses, clutching his chest as though he is suffering a heart attack. And here the episode makes a turn that is genuinely darker than a birthday party has any right to be. High Five Ghost's father kneels over the fallen Muscle Man and pretends to perform CPR, going through the motions of rescue, and then he declares him dead. For a beat, the episode lets that sit. A prank meant to reverse a curse has apparently killed a man, and the two who scared him are left holding the guilt of it, except that it is not real. Muscle Man's death is revealed to be an elaborate prank, staged from the beginning and staged in retaliation for the soda in the face that morning. This is the hinge the whole episode turns on. The grievance that opened the story, the humiliation of the splashed soda, has not been forgotten by Muscle Man for a single moment. He has been building toward this. The exclusion from the guest list was never the revenge. It was the bait. The revenge was the faked death, the false CPR. The whole community of ghosts and family recruited into an act of theater designed to make Mordecai and Rigby believe they had killed him. What looked like a favor from Low Five Ghost, what looked like helpful rules from a friendly father, was in part a performance with an audience of two. When the prank is finally revealed, Low Five Ghost reverses the transformation. He turns Mordecai and Rigby back into themselves, undoing the ghosthood he had granted, and the danger of being stuck forever simply dissolves. It is worth noticing how the two brothers frame the episode from either end. Low Five opens it by making the boys into ghosts, and he closes it by making them boys again. He is the bracket around the whole adventure, the character who both begins and ends the transformation, and he does it without ceremony, as if turning people into ghosts and back is simply a thing his family knows how to do. And then, after all of that, the episode does something that redeems the cruelty of the prank and gives the whole thing its shape. Later at the party, Muscle Man genuinely chokes on food. This is not a stunt. There is no father waiting to fake the CPR, no brother waiting to reverse anything. Muscle Man is really choking, and the person who saves him is Mordecai, the same person who saved Rigby that morning, the same act that started all the trouble. Mordecai saves him for real, and in that moment the two of them call a truce. The rivalry that ran through the entire episode, the feud born from soda and carried through a faked death, ends there, with a real rescue answering a real emergency. The morning's Heimlich caused the whole conflict. The evening's rescue ends it. The episode rhymes the two acts of saving against each other, and the second one closes the wound the first one opened. There is a small, easily missed detail that deepens the family Low Five Ghost belongs to. Within this same episode, we learn that Muscle Man and High Five Ghost have bailed Low Five Ghost out of jail, and that when they did, Low Five was wearing his signature teal sunglasses. It is a throwaway line in the run of the plot, but it does a great deal of quiet characterization. Low Five is not simply the helpful brother with a useful power. He is the one who has been in jail, the one who needed bailing out, the sibling with the sunglasses and the record. In a single reference, the episode gives him an entire off-screen life. a suggestion that the ghost family is not a tidy unit, but has its own troubles and its own history, and that High Five Ghost, the mild floating hand of the background, has a brother who has seen the inside of a cell. The voice work sharpens all of this in a way that rewards knowing it. Low Five Ghost is voiced by Roger Craig Smith, and High Five Ghost's father, the unnamed ghost who explains the rules and stages the fake CPR and declares Muscle Man dead, is voiced by Mark Hamill, the same actor who voices Skips. Consider what that casting quietly does. Skips is one of the show's oldest and most grounded presences, the immortal groundskeeper who has seen everything and explains the supernatural to everyone else. And here the same voice is placed inside the ghost family, given to the father who lays out how ghosthood works and what the price of returning is. Two figures who serve as keepers of the rules, the immortal handyman and the ghost patriarch, share a single voice, and once you hear it, you cannot unhear the connection between them. It does not point at it, but simply lets the same authority speak from two different bodies. What lingers about See You There, when you set the prank aside, is how much genealogy it installs. Before this episode, he is only a shape. After it, he has a brother who can turn the living into the dead and back, a father who governs the rules of that transformation, and a family with a bail bond and a pair of teal sunglasses in its history. The episode dresses all of this in the clothes of a revenge comedy, a story about soda and a faked heart attack, and most viewers take the comedy and leave the family tree behind. But the family tree is the real gift of the episode. It takes the least defined member of the park's world and gives him a lineage, a set of relations, and a logic for how his kind come to exist. The birthday was never only about the party. It was the episode's way of introducing you to where High Five Ghost comes from, and to the strange, rule-bound family standing just behind him. The luchador wears a mask, and the mask is the point. In the tradition of Mexican wrestling, the man who fights does not fight as himself. He fights as a persona, a second self that carries the glory and the shame. And the unwritten law of that world is that you never remove the mask, never speak the name behind it. The face stays hidden, so that the identity can belong to something larger than one body. Keep that idea close, because it is the lens for this chapter, and because Regular Show once put two of its strangest characters directly in front of that world. In the episode Skips in the Saddle, the two friends take their girlfriends, Darla and Celia, to a Mexican wrestling match. It is a small detail, almost a throwaway, and yet it sits at the center of everything these two characters represent. Think about what a mask actually does. It does not only hide, it also joins. When two wrestlers wear the colors of the same team, the mask stops being a disguise and becomes a uniform, a way of saying that the individual matters less than the pair. The two of them are, in a sense, always in costume. One is a short green man in a permanent state of performance. The other is a small gray ghost whose entire vocabulary of expression is a raised hand waiting to be met. They are rarely apart, and when the writers reach for them, they reach for them together, as if they were a single act with two names. The strange thing is that both of these characters are, at the level of the voice, already exercises in hidden identity. Muscle Man is voiced by Sam Marin across the whole run, a single steady presence behind the character from beginning to end. High Five Ghost is different. For the vast majority of the run, he is voiced by the series creator, J.G. Quintel, the same man whose voice you hear in the lead. But the ghost did not begin that way. In his official debut episode, the character was first voiced by Jeff Bennett before Quintel took over the role. So the very first version of High Five Ghost spoke with a borrowed voice, a face already worn by someone else, and only later settled into the identity the show would keep. There is a rightness to that, a character built for anonymity whose own voice was, at the start, on loan. Anonymity runs deeper still. Consider that Muscle Man is not really named Muscle Man at all. Across the episodes Muscle Woman and Cube Bros, the series reveals his real name to be Mitchell Sorenstein, Mitch for short. For most of the run, he is known only by the persona, the loud green brawler who introduces himself through his mother and flexes at every opportunity. The name Mitch Sorenstein is the face under the mask, the ordinary man the wrestling persona is built to cover. And notice how rarely the show uses it. It prefers the mask. It prefers Muscle Man. The real name exists mostly so that you understand there is a person being hidden, a quiet human core inside the performance, present but seldom shown. High Five Ghost carries his own version of this. He is established as originally being from Wichita, Kansas, a small grounding fact that tells you the ghost had a life, a place, a before. But the sharpest expression of his anonymity comes through family. In the episode See You There, we meet his older brother, Low Five Ghost, who looks nearly identical to him. Two ghosts, almost indistinguishable, separated by a name and a gesture. If High Five is the raised hand, Low Five is the hand held low, the same being rotated a few degrees. The series gives us a character whose closest relative is essentially his double, And in doing so, it asks how much of an identity is truly your own when someone can wear your face and only change the greeting. In that same episode, Low Five Ghost turns Mordecai and Rigby into ghosts so that they can sneak into High Five Ghost's birthday party. The mechanism matters for our purposes. To enter the ghost's world, two characters must first shed their own forms and take on the shape of ghosts, must become anonymous, must adopt the mask of the party they are trying to join. It is disguise as admission, transformation as the price of belonging. And it happens at a birthday, the one day that is supposed to be entirely about a single person's identity, celebrated by people who have hidden theirs in order to be there. And then, folded into the same episode, there is Muscle Man doing what Muscle Man does. In See You There, he fakes dying from a scare-induced heart attack, a prank staged to get back at Mordecai and Rigby for spilling soda on him. Set aside the comedy of it for a moment and look at the structure. He performs death. He puts on the ultimate mask, the stillness of the dead, in order to win a small private war. Where the luchador hides his face to protect his identity, Muscle Man hides his life to sell a bit. It is the same instinct running in a different direction. A character so committed to the performance that he will play a corpse to land a joke. The persona swallows the man whole, exactly as a good wrestling character is supposed to. But a mask is only worth wearing if there is someone on the other side of the ring, or someone standing beside you in the same colors. This is where the friendship stops being a comic pairing and becomes the actual subject. The episode New Bro on Campus reveals how the two of them came together. They became friends in high school after Muscle Man saved High Five Ghost from falling into a bottomless pit, and here is the detail that gives it weight. This followed what had been a one-sided rivalry. Before the rescue, the Ghost saw the Green Man as a rival. It took a fall, a genuine drop into nothing, and a hand reaching out to stop it, for the rivalry to dissolve into friendship. The bottomless pit is almost too perfect an image. An identity about to vanish completely, saved at the edge, and the saving is what binds them. Turn that over. The rivalry was one-sided, which means one of them was fighting a match the other did not know he was in. And the resolution was not a victory, but a rescue. In wrestling terms, the story refuses the outcome the ring is built for. Nobody pins anybody. Instead, one man keeps the other from disappearing. And from that moment, the two of them wear the same colors. The friendship is founded not on beating each other, but on refusing to let each other fall. The show eventually says this out loud, though only once and quietly. In the episode Gut Model, High Five Ghost tells Muscle Man directly that he is his best friend. For a pair defined by performance and personas, this is the moment the mask comes off. No prank, no bit, no persona doing the talking. The Ghost from Wichita simply names what the Green Man means to him. And it lands harder precisely because everything around it is disguise. When two characters spend their whole run hiding behind names that are not quite theirs, faces that are nearly their brothers, voices that were once someone else's, the plain statement of friendship becomes the one unmasked thing. So when they take Starla and Celia to that wrestling match and Skips in the saddle, watch what the scene is really doing. It places two men who are themselves a kind of costume double act in front of the art form that made anonymity into brotherhood. They are the audience and, without knowing it, the subject. The mask hides the name so that the bond can outlive the man. Mitch Sorenstein and a ghost from Kansas figured that out in a high school long before they ever bought the tickets. There is a moment in the third season, in an episode called Trucker Hall of Fame, that most viewers pass over without a second thought. Muscle Man's father has died. His trucker hat is to be burned, its ashes carried to a place called the Trucker Hall of Fame and scattered there. A small ceremony for a man who spent his life, or so his son believes, on the open road. Benson needs someone to go with Muscle Man on this errand of grief. He sends Mordecai and Rigby. And when Mordecai asks the obvious question, the question anyone would ask, the whole chapter turns on the answer. Why not High Five Ghost? That is what Mordecai wants to know. High Five Ghost is Muscle Man's closest friend, his constant partner, the other half of nearly every scene the two of them share. If any character in the park should stand beside Muscle Man while he says goodbye to his father, it is the Ghost. But Benson does not send him. Benson explains, in effect, that High Five Ghost cannot handle this sort of thing. And then the series does something quiet and deliberate. It cuts away to High Five Ghost himself, seen through a window, crying. Think about what that image is doing. Here is a ghost, a being who by definition has already crossed the line that death draws. And the mere mention of a funeral, the mere proximity to mourning, reduces him to tears. He cannot be in the room. He has to be watched from outside, through glass, as though his grief were something too private or too raw to sit inside the main frame of the story. It is played lightly, the way the series plays almost everything. But it lands as one of the strangest and most revealing beats regular show ever gives this character. To understand why it is strange, you have to hold the whole of High Five Ghost in your mind at once. He is a ghost. That is not a nickname or a costume. Within the world of the series, he is a spirit, a being who died and continued on in this floating, translucent form. And yet the writers never once explain it. It never tells you when he died. It never tells you how. It never offers a single scene, a single line, a single flashback that accounts for the circumstances of his death. His origin is simply left open, permanently, an unanswered question threaded through every episode he appears in. It gets stranger still. Some fans point to material that seems to depict High Five Ghost as having been a ghost since he was an infant. There are images of him as a ghost baby, already spectral, already floating, as though he never lived a mortal life at all. And that directly contradicts the other reading, the one where he died as a grown character and became a ghost afterward. A person who dies as an adult cannot also have been a ghost from infancy. The two ideas cannot both be true. It never notices the contradiction, never addresses it, never smooths it over. It simply lets both versions stand, side by side, without comment. So consider where that leaves this small scene in Trucker Hall of Fame. The one moment in the entire run where his relationship to death is dramatized directly is a moment of pure avoidance. He does not confront death. He does not explain it. He flees from it, weeping, and the show frames his flight as the natural order of things, so ordinary that Benson can state it as a simple fact of scheduling. He does not deal well with this sort of thing. That is all. No one asks him why. No one presses. The subject is closed almost as soon as it opens. This is where the analysis becomes truly interesting to me, and where I want to be careful to separate what the series confirms from what viewers have built around it. Fans have noticed exactly what you have just noticed. They have seen that he grows consistently uncomfortable, visibly distressed, whenever death enters a scene. And they have taken that discomfort as evidence, circumstantial but persistent, that he really did die at some point. That the reason death unsettles him is that it is his own unhealed wound. It is a reasonable inference. It gives you a ghost who cannot bear to be near a funeral. And the simplest explanation is that the funeral touches something he has lived through and cannot face. But it remains an inference. Regular show never confirms it on screen. The evidence is behavioral, never stated. And here the irony of the episode sharpens, because the story surrounding High Five Ghost's absence is itself a story about what a person really was underneath the version they presented to the world. Mordecai and Rigby, carrying out the errand the ghost could not, meet three truckers at the hall. And the truckers tell them something that undoes the whole premise of the trip. Muscle Dad was not actually a trucker. He had always claimed to be one, but he was really a forklift driver. Muscle Man overhears this. He is devastated. The father he is mourning, the father whose ashes he has come all this way to scatter among truckers, was not the man he said he was. Sit with the parallel for a moment, because the episode places these two things almost on top of each other without ever pointing at the scene. On one side of the park is a father whose true nature turns out to be unknown, who spent a lifetime presenting himself as one thing while being another, and whose son must now reckon with the gap between the claim and the fact. On the other side, watching from behind a window, is a ghost whose true nature is also unknown, whose death is a claim the show makes and never substantiates, whose very existence rests on a story no one has ever actually told. Both figures are defined by a missing account of who they really were. One of them cannot even be in the room while the other's account comes apart. Muscle Man, to his credit, does not let the revelation break the ceremony. He finds a note. It reveals that spreading his father's ashes at the Hall of Fame was the man's dying wish, and Muscle Man decides to honor it anyway, forklift driver or not, choosing the wish over the correction, the intention over the technical truth. He accepts the father he had rather than the father he imagined. He can do this because he is present, because he stayed, because he walked into the place where grief lives and let it work on him. That is precisely the thing High Five Ghost could not do. Which returns us, finally, to the question the show refuses to answer, and to why I think it matters more than a light half-minute gag would suggest. Some critics have put it plainly, arguing that there is no consensus, not among the fans, and not even among its own writers, about what High Five Ghost is actually supposed to be. His existence is named as one of the series' enduring unexplained mysteries. And when you set that alongside the crying figure at the window, the mystery stops feeling like an oversight and starts feeling almost like the point. A character built out of an unresolved death who breaks down at the sight of death in a show that will never tell you whether he died at all. He is the one weakness in an otherwise unshakable figure. Everywhere else in the run he floats through the world untroubled. A calm and buoyant presence, a ghost entirely at ease with being a ghost. Only here, only at the threshold of a funeral, does the ease fail him. And the show, holding its own secret about him, lets him weep behind the glass and never asks him why. Consider the strange shape of the story, regular show tells in its 6th season. In an episode that first aired on the 6th of November, 2014 on Cartoon Network. It was written by Minty Lewis, Sarah Oleksic, and J.G. Quintel, and directed by John Davis Infantino and Sean Sellis. And it carries a title that sounds like a funeral notice. The End of Muscle Man. What that title promises and what it delivers are two different things, and the gap between them is where this chapter lives. It begins with a diagnosis, or something close to one. Muscle Man returns from a doctor carrying vague news, the kind of news that arrives without edges, and he responds the way people in stories respond when they believe their time is short. He makes a list, a bucket list, a catalog of things he wants to do before what he calls the end. And he hands this list to the park crew as a kind of last request. Think about what a document like that asks of the people who receive it. It asks them to believe. It asks them to drop whatever they were doing and reorganize their days around someone else's final wishes. And the crew, being who they are, agrees. Then the episode does something that pushes the whole situation past ordinary worry and into certainty. Death himself shows up, personally, looking for Muscle Man. And a phone call comes in from Muscle Man's doctor, who tells the crew that their friend is going to a better place. Put those two things together, the arrival of death and the doctor's soft euphemism, and you can understand why the crew stops doubting. The evidence, as they see it, is overwhelming. A man came back sick. A list appeared. The personification of mortality is walking around asking for him by name. And a medical professional has all but confirmed the outcome. Grief, at that point, is not gullibility. It is the reasonable response to what appears to be true. So they act on it. The crew rushes to fulfill the bucket list, and the effort is not small or symbolic. There is a trip to Wing Kingdom, with Muscle Man's closest friends gathered around him. The sort of outing you arrange when you think it might be the last one. And Benson, the manager whose entire character is built around money and the guarding of it, spends roughly $12,000 on the whole undertaking. Hold on to that figure, because it matters later. Benson does not part with money easily. For him to spend that much is itself a form of testimony. It tells you how completely the crew believed, and it sets the size of the debt that is about to come due. And then the reveal, which reframes everything that came before it. The end was never a death. It was a metaphor. Muscle Man staged the entire ordeal, the list, the doctor, the whole atmosphere of mourning, in order to symbolically end one version of himself. He wanted to kill off the Bachelor, the persona called Muscle Man, and step forward as Mitch Sorenstein, the name underneath the nickname. All of it was scaffolding for a proposal. He was going to ask Starla to marry him, and he decided that the right way to do that was to bury who he had been first. Here the episode complicates its own trick. Because Starla does not simply say yes to the man who appears. She initially rejects the proposal, and her reason is precise. She fell in love with Muscle Man, she explains, in effect, not with this new figure called Mitch. The very transformation he thought he needed is the thing she does not want. She only accepts once he promises that he does not have to stop being Muscle Man in order to marry her. Notice what that does. It undoes the premise of the whole scheme. The death he staged was unnecessary, even counterproductive, because the person he tried to leave behind was the person she loved. The metaphor collapses. There was nothing to end, which brings the crew back into the room, and back to the $12,000, and back to the days of grief they spent on a lie. When the truth lands, the rest of the park crew is furious, and their anger is not petty. They believed, genuinely, that a friend was dying. They rearranged their lives, they spent their time and their effort and Benson's considerable money. They carried the particular weight of anticipatory loss, and they now learn that every ounce of it was spent on a performance. The betrayal they feel is proportional to the sincerity they brought. You cannot be that angry unless you first cared that much. Their fury, in a strange way, is the receipt for their love. And then there is High Five Ghost. He is the one exception. Of the entire crew, he is the only member who does not get angry at Muscle Man for the ruse. While the others tally up what the deception cost them, High Five Ghost embraces the outcome and congratulates his friend, calling the proposal the best one ever. This is the detail worth pausing on, because it reveals where his loyalty actually sits, and it separates him from everyone else in the room by the width of a whole worldview. Consider what the choice requires of him. High Five Ghost was lied to exactly as much as the others were. He too believed his friend was dying. He too would have felt the grief and, presumably, contributed to the effort. He has every one of the same reasons to be angry, and he declines all of them. What that tells you is that his allegiance is not to the accounting. The others, understandably, are measuring the event by what it took from them, and by that measure, Muscle Man wronged them. High Five Ghost measures it by what it gave to Muscle Man. His friend got engaged. The proposal worked. And that outcome to him is worth more than the deception cost. So completely that the deception does not even register as a grievance. There is a kind of loyalty that survives being fooled, and this is it. Most of the crew's relationship to Muscle Man runs through the ordinary channels: the shared work, the shared money, the expectation of honesty between people who depend on one another. When those channels are violated, the relationship registers damage, and it should. High Five Ghost's bond runs somewhere underneath all of that. It is the friendship of the person who wants your happiness so plainly that he will forgive the method the moment he sees the result. He does not need to have been treated fairly. He needs his friend to be happy, and his friend is happy, and that settles it. To its credit, the series does not moralize about which response is correct. The angry crew is not punished, and High Five Ghost is spared any halo. The two reactions simply sit side by side, the whole park furious and one ghost delighted, and the contrast does the work. In a single episode about a fake death and a real engagement, the revealing moment is not the proposal itself. It is who in the room chose to celebrate it. Everyone counted the cost. One of them decided the cost did not matter. There is a particular kind of horror that regular show reserves for the ordinary, and the segment called Going Up begins in the most ordinary way imaginable. High Five Ghost stands outside an apartment building 36 floors tall, holding a bouquet of flowers. He has come to visit Celia, his girlfriend, and the whole occasion is possible only because of a strange piece of machinery. This is the third of 4 stories inside Terror Tales of the Park 5, and the frame around all of them is that Benson has rented a wish-granting machine for the park's Halloween party. Each character makes a wish, and each wish becomes a small nightmare. When it is High Five Ghost's turn, he does not wish for power or wealth or escape. He wishes to see the person he loves. Hold on to that, because everything that follows grows out of the smallness and the sweetness of that wish. He arrives at the building, and he makes a choice. He can take the stairs or he can take the elevator, and he chooses the elevator. It is the kind of decision no one thinks about, the kind of decision that is not really a decision at all in ordinary life. You press a button, a door opens, a small room carries you upward. Regular show understands that horror lives in exactly these unconsidered moments. In the machinery we trust without a second thought. The flowers are still in his hands. The evening is still, as far as he knows, a romantic one. Before the doors close on him, he meets a repairman who is just finishing his work on the elevator. This is a reassuring image, or it is meant to be. A repairman at the end of a job is a sign that something has been fixed, that the machine is safe, that the ordinary world is being maintained by ordinary people doing ordinary work. High Five Ghost speaks with him, the way you might exchange a word with any worker you pass in a lobby. And then he steps inside and begins the ride up. And the elevator, freshly worked on, freshly tended to, malfunctions. It goes out of control on the way up. The thing that was supposed to have been repaired becomes the thing that betrays him. He survives the ride, wrecked and rattled, and he reaches Celia. Here the segment does something quietly lovely before it turns cruel. He gives her the flowers. She is happy to see him. Despite the elevator, despite whatever terror the climb has just put him through, the reunion is warm. For a moment, the story is exactly the story he wished for. The two of them are together, the flowers have arrived, the gesture has landed. Notice what that does inside a Halloween anthology built to frighten. The show lets the tender thing be real first. It gives us the payoff of the wish before it begins to take it apart. And then Celia tells him something that reframes the entire climb he has just endured. The elevator, she says in effect, has been broken for decades. It was never going to be safe. And the repairman he spoke to, the reassuring figure finishing his work at the doors, died 40 years earlier. The man was not a man. The repair was not a repair. Every comfort the scene offered him on the way in was a lie assembled out of the ordinary furniture of a building. And High Five Ghost walked straight through it because it looked exactly like the world he expected to find. This is the hinge of the whole segment, and it rewards a pause because it plays a strange trick on a viewer's sense of who belongs where. High Five Ghost is himself a ghost. He is the one who, in the logic of most stories, would be the frightening presence in a lobby, the thing that should not be there. But Going Up inverts that entirely. Here the ghost is the one carrying flowers, the one in love, the one who trusts the repairman and steps into the elevator. And the dead man, the one who has been dead for 40 years, is the monster. The show separates two ideas that horror usually treats as the same. Being dead is not what makes the repairman terrible. Being dead is simply High Five Ghost's condition too. What makes the repairman terrible is something else, a hunger underneath the friendly surface, and the segment saves that reveal for last. Because after Celia speaks, the repairman reveals his true form. He is a ghoul, an undead thing wearing the shape of a workman, and he drops the disguise. He grabs High Five Ghost. He causes the elevator to crash and to explode, and in the story of the segment both of them die, the repairman and High Five Ghost together. The wish that began with flowers and a 36-floor building ends in fire. The person who only wanted to see someone he loved is killed inside the very machine he chose over the stairs. There is a real question buried in this, and the segment raises it without ever pausing to answer it, which is part of why it lingers. What does it mean for a ghost to die? High Five Ghost is already a spirit, already on the far side of the line that death is supposed to draw. And yet the segment treats his death as a death, as an ending with weight, an explosion that takes him out of the story. Regular show has always been loose and playful with its rules about death and connection, letting characters cross back and forth, letting a ghost hold a bouquet and love a human woman. Going Up pushes on that looseness until it strains. It suggests a world where death is not a single wall, but a series of thresholds, where a ghost can still be courting, still be climbing toward someone, still be undone. The relationship between High Five Ghost and Celia, a ghost and a human, is the series insisting that connection reaches across that line. The ending is the show reminding you that the line is still dangerous, that something else lives out there in the dark of the shaft, and that it does not love anyone. Underneath the fear, the segment is genuinely romantic, and I think that is the source of its particular ache. Celia is happy to see him. The flowers matter. The climb was undertaken for a good and gentle reason. Everything sharp in the story is aimed at that gentleness, and the horror works precisely because the affection is sincere. This is not a monster hunting a victim who deserves it, or a fool who blunders into obvious danger. This is someone in love taking an elevator. The cruelty of the piece is that it dresses its trap in the plainest, most trusting act a person can perform, which is to go and see the one they care about. A little about how this small, strange story came to exist. Going Up was written and storyboarded by Toby Jones and Owen Dennis, and it sits inside a special that broke the pattern of its own tradition. Every earlier Terror Tales of the Park had told 3 stories. Terror Tales of the Park 5 tells 4. Alongside Going Up there are the segments titled Mr., Bossman, Werepops, and Chocolatude, making this the only entry in the series to carry 4 tales instead of 3. The whole special first aired on the 29th of October in the year 2015 on Cartoon Network, as part of what the network billed as regular shows Terror Tales Week. It arrived, in other words, as a seasonal thing. A Halloween offering timed to the week when audiences come looking to be unsettled. One more detail gives the segment an extra dimension, and it lives in the casting. Celia is voiced by the actress Zosia Mamet, who was widely known at the time for playing Shoshana Shapiro on the HBO series Girls. Something apt sits in bringing an actress associated with a very grounded, very human, very contemporary kind of storytelling into a role opposite a small blue ghost in a Halloween cartoon. Her presence lends Celia a reality that the surrounding horror needs. For the trap to close, the affection has to feel like something a real person would offer, and the voice work is part of how the segment earns the warmth it later burns down. The reunion has to be believable before the elevator can take it all away. By the time the series reaches its end, in the special that aired in January of 2017, regular show has to decide what to do with the people who were never the point. The finale, a regular epic final battle, runs about 33 minutes and is built from 3 parts stitched into one broadcast. And it is the third of those parts, titled The Power, that turns from spectacle toward accounting. This is where it stops moving forward and instead moves outward, checking on the lives it had let drift to the edges of the frame. Among those lives is High Five Ghost, a character who spent most of the run at the edge of the frame, a small figure who existed mostly to raise a hand. The finale gives him a future, and the way it gives it to him is one of the strangest things the writers ever did. To understand why the ending lands the way it does, you have to go back 3 years to an episode from early 2014 called The Postcard. That is where High Five Ghost and the human character Celia become a couple, and the episode frames their reunion around an act of patience that is almost absurd in its scale. He had waited 4 years for a postcard from her, sent from Prague. Weigh that against a character who was rarely allowed to want anything on screen. The show assigns him the longest, steadiest devotion in its whole cast, and it does so almost in passing, the way it did most things about him. So when the finale arrives at its epilogue, High Five Ghost is no blank being handed a random happy ending. He is the one member of the supporting cast whose romance the series had already planted and watered. The epilogue pays that off by sending him and Celia into a life together as touring DJs, and it ties that life back to Prague, the same city that sent the postcard he waited 4 years to receive. There is a neatness to that loop the writers do not underline. It simply closes the circle and moves on to the next character, trusting the listener to notice that the ending grew from something the writers had set down years earlier. Here is where the record becomes genuinely uncertain, and I want to be honest about that rather than smooth it over. If you go to Wikipedia's article about the finale episode, it quotes the epilogue narration word for word, and that narration says, High Five Ghost and his girlfriend Celia become party DJs touring in Prague and later have a son. Girlfriend, in the show's own voice, at the moment the ending is spoken aloud, Celia is his girlfriend, and the two of them go on to have a son. That is the primary text, the line the episode actually delivers. But a second Wikipedia article, the one that catalogs its characters, describes the very same moment differently. It says the two of them become a married DJ duo who tour the world together and have a son together. Married, not girlfriend. World, not Prague. So the two reference articles about the identical scene disagree on one of the simplest questions you could ask about it, which is whether these two people are married when the story leaves them. This is the kind of small contradiction that usually goes unnoticed, and it matters here because High Five Ghost's whole arc is about the shape of a commitment. Whether the story marries him off or leaves him a devoted boyfriend changes the exact note his story ends on, and the sources do not agree on which note that is. A third account complicates it further, and in a useful way. The AV Club published its review of the finale the day after it aired, written by Eric Thurm, and when that review reaches the couple it mentions neither a marriage nor a son. It describes their ending only as a successful DJing career, and it lingers instead on a visual detail, noting that the older version of the character, Fives, has a soul patch and a beanie now. That is worth a second look. A contemporary reviewer, watching the same epilogue the same week it premiered, took away the career and the aged-up look and did not register the family at all. So we have three descriptions of one short passage. One calls Celia a girlfriend who has a son with him. One calls her a wife who tours the world with him. One mentions only the music and the beanie. The scene is brief, the epilogue moves fast, and the discrepancies are a fair sign of just how quickly the writers sketched these fates. What is not in dispute is how many people watched it happen. The second and third parts of the finale, the stretch that contains this epilogue, each drew about 1.37 million viewers in the United States, which made it the most watched episode of the show's 8th season. So the largest audience the season ever gathered was the audience present for these send-offs, including the one given to a character most of them had barely thought about for years. Regular Show chose to spend its biggest moment not only on its leads, but on the people around them, and that choice was deliberate. The series creator, J.G. Quintel, said as much in interviews after the finale. He described the ending as a way to show how the cast ended up, some with families, some with girlfriends, some with wives and kids, and he framed those character epilogues as a maturing send-off for the whole supporting cast, not only for Mordecai and Rigby. Read against that intention, High Five Ghost's ending stops looking like a throwaway. It is one deliberate entry in a designed survey of adulthood, a checklist of the different ways its people grew up. Some got families, some got partners. High Five Ghost got the music, the touring, the return to Prague, and the son, whatever his exact marital status at the final frame. There is a quiet logic to the fact that his closure arrives outside the main story. He does not get a battle or a farewell speech. He gets a sentence in an epilogue, delivered while the audience is still catching its breath from everything else. And in that sentence, he becomes a working artist and a father on his own terms, far from the park and the two friends the series was really about. The background character is allowed to walk off into a foreground of his own, one the camera never follows. That the sources cannot quite agree on the details of that life feels, in a strange way, true to him. He was always the figure at the edge, the one you had to look twice to see clearly. There is a moment in the 7th season of Regular Show, in an episode called The Button, that has become the load-bearing beam for anyone who wants to think seriously about High Five Ghost. A scientist character, offhand, in the middle of everything else the episode is doing, names High Five Ghost the most logical of the park's workers. It is a small line, it is delivered without ceremony, and no one stops to underline it. But consider who is being described. This is a character who, for the first several years of the series, barely speaks. This is a character who is, in the plainest sense, half a person, a small, mostly translucent white ghost body with a single arm and hand rising from the top where a head would be. And the writers never explain why he is shaped that way. And of all the workers in that park, of all the shouting and the schemes and the arm wrestling and the elaborate self-inflicted disasters, the show chooses to hand the crown of logic to him. Look at that as a design decision, because it did not have to be him. The park is full of louder candidates. Gibbs is ancient and wise. Benson is the manager, the one nominally in charge of order. And yet the writers reach past all of them and place reason, quietly, in the smallest and quietest figure on the property. That is the philosophy this chapter is circling. High Five Ghost was never built to be the engine of the comedy. He is built to be the ballast underneath it. To understand him, you have to go back to where he came from, because his origins are almost accidental. He first appeared not as a speaking character at all, but as a non-speaking cameo in the unaired, non-canon pilot for Regular Show. A face in the background before the world around him had a shape. When the series proper began, In his official debut in the first season, in 2010, he was voiced not by the series creator, but by an actor named Jeff Bennett. That is worth holding for a second. The high five ghost most fans know, the voice they carry in their heads, was not there at the start. J.G. Quintel, the creator of Regular Show, the man who also voiced Mordecai, took over the role only afterward, and then held it across the great majority of the series and into Regular Show, the movie. So the character was handed off early from one voice to another, and it was the creator himself who decided to pick him up and carry him personally. That choice hints at how close Quintel felt to this odd little figure. And the closeness makes sense once you know where the supporting cast came from. Quintel has said in an interview that he built out the world beyond the core four, beyond Mordecai and Rigby and Pops and Benson, by reaching back into character designs he had liked from his student films at CalArts, reusing them, combining them, letting them find new life in a new show. In his own words, once those four were in place, then Skips and Muscle Man and all the rest just kind of came along. High Five Ghost is one of the ones who came along. He is a design that survived from an earlier, smaller, more personal body of work, carried forward because his maker was fond of him. There is a kind of quiet tenderness in that, a creator keeping an old drawing alive by giving it a job and a friend. And the friend is the whole point of him, in many ways. High Five Ghost is Muscle Man's best friend, and the two of them work side by side as groundskeepers in the park. Muscle Man is by design one of the crudest and most abrasive presences in the whole cast. A character built to grate, to boast, to push everyone's patience. And through all of it, through the crudest and nastiest stretches of Muscle Man's behavior, High Five Ghost stays loyal. He stays supportive. He does not flinch away, and he does not try to reform his friend into something more palatable. He simply remains. If you are looking for the emotional logic the show assigned to him, it is right there in that steadiness. He is the counterweight to a character who has none. He is the calm hand, the single hand he has, resting steadily beside a person who is all noise. For the first 3 seasons, he says very little. This is not an oversight, it is a texture. A near-silent character in an ensemble becomes a kind of tuning fork. Everyone else is defined by what they say, by how much they say, by how badly they say it. He is defined by presence, by reaction, by the quiet fact of being there. And then, from around the 4th season onward, as the series grew and settled and found more room, the writers began to give him progressively more dialogue. He was allowed, slowly, to speak more. But it is telling that the show established his character in silence first and only added words later, once we already knew who he was without them. The silence did the foundational work. The words were built on top of a personality we had learned to read from his stillness. There is one scene, more than any other, that reveals what that stillness contains. And it lives in the 3rd season, in an episode called Trucker Hall of Fame from 2012. In it, High Five Ghost is shown crying inconsolably outside a funeral. Not composed, not merely moved, but undone. And the plot turns on this. Muscle Man needs to go and scatter his father's ashes, and Benson has to decide who accompanies him, and Benson looks at High Five Ghost, the best friend, the obvious choice, and rules him out precisely because of this distress over death. Benson assigns Mordecai and Rigby to go instead. The character closest to Muscle Man is kept away from the most important moment of grief in Muscle Man's life, and the reason is that he simply cannot bear the subject. His feeling is too large to be useful, and I find that one of the most humane things the series ever did with him, because it treats his emotion not as a joke to be punctured, but as a real limit, a real cost, something that changes what the plot is allowed to do. Now hold that image against the plainest fact of his existence. He is a ghost. He is, by his very nature, a thing that death has already happened to, a being that exists on the far side of the door everyone else is afraid of. And he is the one who cannot cope with death. He is the one who falls apart at a funeral. The fan reference wikis note this as an intentional irony, and it is, but it is more than a gag. It is a small argument about how feeling works. Being closer to something does not make it easier to face. The one who should, by all logic, be numb to mortality is the one most wounded by it. And here is where his supposed logic and his overwhelming emotion stop being a contradiction and start being the same thing. To be the most logical member of the park is not to be the coldest. It is to see clearly. And seeing death clearly, understanding exactly what it takes, is precisely what breaks him. That is the philosophy the writers built into a character who can barely speak and has only one arm and no explained anatomy at all. He is the still point. He is the one who stays loyal when loyalty is hardest, who feels grief when grief is largest, who reasons soundly when everyone around him is losing the thread. The show could have made its half-formed little ghost a throwaway, a background shape recycled from an old student film. Instead, the creator gave him his own voice, gave him a friendship worth protecting, gave him a sorrow deep enough to reorganize a plot, And then, seasons later, let a passing scientist name what had been true the whole time. He is the most logical one there, not because he is unmoved, because he understands. Consider the second episode of Regular Show, which first aired on the 13th of September, 2010. It is a small door in the history of the series, and most people walk through it without noticing what is on the other side. This is the episode that introduces High Five Ghost as a speaking character, and it is the first episode in which both he and Muscle Man are given voices to use. Two of its most familiar background figures arrive here, in the second installment, before the series has fully decided what it is. And the ghost in this first appearance does not sound the way he will sound for the rest of his life. The reason is simple and strange. In that second episode, High Five Ghost is voiced by Jeff Bennett. The episode's character credits list him plainly, and they list him 3 times over, because in this same half hour, Bennett also voices 2 other characters, a figure called Pony and a figure called Jimmy. 1 actor, 3 parts, folded into a single early episode. That is not unusual for a debut season, when a cast is still loose and roles are still being handed around. What is unusual is what happened next. After this appearance, the voice changed hands. J.G. Quintel, the creator of the series, took over High Five Ghost, and from that point forward, he voiced the character in every subsequent episode and every subsequent appearance. Bennett's version exists in exactly one place, sealed inside the second episode, and every ghost you hear afterward is Quintel. Picture a listener who came to Regular Show later, who knows High Five Ghost only as a steady presence across the years. The voice they consider definitive was not the first voice. The first voice was replaced, without announcement, and never returned. No one ever explained why. There is no official statement on record from Quintel, from Cartoon Network, or from the production accounting for the change. This is worth dwelling on, because so much of what people believe about this show is built out of guesses poured into silences. And here is one of those silences at the very foundation. A voice actor of considerable range introduces a character, and then the creator himself takes the character back, and the paperwork simply moves on. We know that it happened. We do not know the reasoning behind it. Anything offered as a reason is invention, and this chapter will not invent one. But we can look at what the change produced, and that is where the more interesting thought begins. When Quintel assumed the role, he was already the voice of Mordecai, one of the 2 protagonists at the center of the entire series. Taking on High Five Ghost made him a dual-role cast member for the rest of the series' run. The same throat that carries the lead also carries this small floating figure at the edge of the frame. That is an unusual arrangement, and it is easy to pass over, because the 2 characters sound nothing alike and rarely draw attention to their shared origin. Here is the narrator's opinion, offered as opinion and not as fact. The decision to keep High Five Ghost inside the creator's own voice, rather than leave him with a specialist like Bennett, suggests that his sound was treated as something to be shaped from the inside of the show, rather than cast from the outside. A creator voicing a minor character is not merely filling a gap. It is a way of keeping close control over a texture, of deciding personally how a thing should register in the ear. Whatever the private reason for the swap, the result is that the ghostliness of High Five Ghost became the responsibility of the person who imagined him, and that responsibility never passed back out again. And this is the deeper point the episode gestures toward, even if it cannot prove it. A ghost in a cartoon is first a drawing. He floats, he is pale, he is soft at the edges. But a ghost is also a sound, and the 2 do not have to be made by the same hands or arrive at the same time. In that episode, the drawing and the first voice belong to different people, and then the voice is pulled back under the creator's control while the drawing stays exactly as it was. The visible ghost is continuous. The audible ghost is not. That gap between what the eye accepts as stable and what the ear quietly received as a substitution is the real subject here. You can hear, in the shape of this history, an argument that the show never made out loud. It is that a character's presence is not settled by design alone. High Five Ghost looked finished from his first appearance, but he did not sound finished, because the sound was still being decided, still being moved from one voice to another until it landed where the creator wanted it. For most characters, the voice is fixed early and forgotten. For this one, the voice was the variable, the thing worth changing even after the debut had already aired and the design had already been shown to an audience. The stability that followed is its own kind of evidence. Once Quintel had the role, he held it without interruption through the entire original run, from 2010 to 2017, across every season the series produced. He carried it beyond the television series as well, reprising High Five Ghost in the theatrical film released in 2015, Regular Show, the movie. Whatever uncertainty surrounded the character's voice in that second episode was resolved into something that did not waver again for years. The experiment ended, and the answer, once found, was kept. So the second episode remains a small anomaly, a single recording in which the ghost speaks with a voice he will never use again. Jeff Bennett is there, credited, holding the part for one appearance alongside two others he played the same day. And then the voice moves, without announcement, into the keeping of the man who made the show, and it stays there. You are left with a quiet lesson about how these characters are built. The face can be right on the first try. The sound can take one more attempt, made in silence, explained to no one, and settled so completely afterward that most listeners never learn it was ever in doubt. There is a character in regular show who almost never argues. He agrees, he raises his hand, and the other hand meets it. That is the whole of what most viewers remember about High Five Ghost, and it is easy to file him under comic furniture, a floating shape whose only job is to punctuate Muscle Man's jokes. But if you watch the way regular show returns to him across 3 separate episodes, across 3 separate years of its life, a quieter argument begins to form. The show is using this minor figure to say something it never states outright, which is that loyalty does not have to be re-earned in every scene to be real. It can simply be a constant, a thing already decided, running underneath the noise. Start with the smallest of the 3, the one that is barely even about him. In Fists of Justice, the center of the episode belongs to Skips, to the magical gloves called the Fists of Justice and the monster Clorgbane the Destroyer. That is the main event, the mythic fight, the reason the episode exists. Muscle Man and his ghost are elsewhere, running a secondary storyline that would be easy to forget. They have taken the computer and refused to let anyone else use it, and the strange detail is that they are not using it either. They are simply holding it, hoarding it, keeping it from Mordecai and Rigby out of something like principle. So Mordecai and Rigby challenge them to a basketball game, the computer as the prize, and Mordecai and Rigby win. On its face, that is nothing, a throwaway B-plot resolved in a single game. But notice the shape of it. High Five Ghost defends nothing he actually needs. He is standing beside Muscle Man in a position that makes very little sense, guarding a computer neither of them wants to use. And he loses, and it does not matter. What he is defending is not the object, it is the alliance. Wherever Muscle Man plants himself, however arbitrary the hill, High Five Ghost is already standing on it. The episode does not treat this as a flaw to be corrected. It treats it as a given. So ordinary the writers do not even bother to comment on it. That absence of comment is the point. The show is not asking why High Five Ghost sides with his friend. It has already decided the question is not worth asking. The middle episode is where the loyalty stops being a joke and starts to cost something. Trucker Hall of Fame is built around a lie, though a tender one. 3 truckers reveal to Mordecai and Rigby that Muscle Man's late father, the man Muscle Man has spent his whole life describing as a proud truck driver, was in fact a forklift driver. The mythology Muscle Man carried, the identity he built on his father's memory, turns out to rest on something smaller than he believed. And then the note appears. Muscle Dad had lied on purpose, telling his son he was a trucker to toughen him up for the time when he would be gone, and Muscle Man reads this and forgives him. The forgiveness is immediate. There is no long negotiation with the betrayal. The lie was an act of love, and Muscle Man accepts it as one. But the moment I keep returning to is not Muscle Man's grief. It is what his grief does to the ghost beside him. At the memorial, Muscle Man breaks down, and his breakdown is so total, so unguarded, that it makes High Five Ghost cry as well. Follow what that does mechanically inside the story. The plot needs to send someone on the road trip to spread Muscle Dad's ashes, and Benson chooses Mordecai and Rigby specifically because High Five Ghost cannot be sent. He is too far inside his friend's pain to function. His weeping is not a reaction to a death he witnessed. It is a reaction to a person he loves being in agony. The grief travels straight across from Muscle Man into him with no resistance, because there was never any wall there to slow it down. That is what the high fives were always standing in for. The unconditional agreement was never shallow. It was the visible surface of a bond that runs all the way down. And the episode gives that bond a strange, generous payoff, though not for the ghost. Out on the road, when Muscle Man, Mordecai, and Rigby are cornered by Bear Dog and his crew at the Hall of Fame, it is Muscle Dad's ghost who returns to rescue them. The father who lied to toughen his son comes back one more time to protect him. There is a symmetry there that the show lets sit unremarked. Muscle Man is a man who inspires this kind of devotion. From a father beyond death, and from a friend who cannot stop crying at his side, and the episode never explains why. It does not need to. Some people are simply loved like that, and the story asks you to accept it the way High Five Ghost accepts it, as a fact rather than a puzzle. Then comes the third episode years later, and it takes the whole idea and tests it against something crueler. The end of Muscle Man opens with Death himself showing up looking for Muscle Man, and the episode lets you believe, for a while, that this is the end. Watch High Five Ghost in those stretches. He is devastated. He believes his best friend is about to die, and the belief hollows him out completely. This is the same emotional current from the memorial, only now it is anticipatory, a grief in advance, a mourning for a loss that has not happened yet. Everything the character is built on is on display here. The total identification, the inability to hold himself separate from Muscle Man's fate. And then the show pulls the rug. Muscle Man was never dying. He staged the entire death scare so that he could have one last hurrah, one final run as his old self, before proposing to Starla as a changed man. The whole ordeal, the grief he watched his friends suffer, was a performance he chose to put them through. When Starla hears the proposal, she rejects it at first, because she fell in love with him as Muscle Man, the loud and gross and unchangeable person he has always been. And she only accepts once he promises not to change at all. That is its own small comedy, a man who nearly reinvents himself, learning that the reinvention was the mistake. But the ending I want you to hold on to is the reaction of the crew. They are angry, and they have every right to be, because he faked his death, he manufactured their sorrow, he spent their love on a lie. Every member of the park is furious with him, and the episode does not pretend they are wrong. Every member except one. High Five Ghost alone congratulates Muscle Man on his engagement to Starla. Sit with how strange that is. He had been shattered worse than anyone when death appeared. He had more reason than any of them to feel used, because he felt the false loss most deeply. And he is the single character who sets that aside instantly and offers his friend joy on the day of his engagement. That is the show's clearest statement about him, and maybe its clearest statement about a certain kind of love. The others weigh Muscle Man's behavior, they judge the deception, they decide whether he has earned their goodwill in this particular instance, and they conclude that he has not. High Five Ghost runs no such calculation. He never has. The loyalty was settled a long time ago. In some scene the series never bothered to give us, and it does not get reopened for review every time Muscle Man does something foolish or selfish or cruel. A friend has good news, so he congratulates the friend. The debt was never being tallied. Across the basketball court, the memorial and the faked funeral, the same figure keeps doing the same thing, and the show keeps declining to explain it, because the refusal to explain is the argument. Loyalty in regular show, in its purest form, is not a verdict reached again and again. It is a hand already raised, waiting for the other hand, whether or not the moment deserves it. Consider how strange it is that a character who barely spoke became one of the series' best-loved figures. High Five Ghost, whom fans and characters alike came to call High Fives, or simply Fives, spent the first 3 seasons of regular show hovering at the margins, a floating pun with a hand for a head, given almost nothing to say. And yet, by the time the series ended, he had accumulated the kind of affection usually reserved for leads. Part of the answer lies in how little he was given, and how much a listener is willing to project onto a figure who holds his silence. When a character speaks rarely, every gesture carries weight, and an audience begins to fill the quiet with a personality of its own making. There is a small piece of production history that fans return to again and again, and it says something about how the character was regarded even by the people making him. In his very first appearance, a Season 1 episode, High Five Ghost, was, by some fans' accounts, voiced by a different performer than the one who would go on to define the character for the rest of the series. But in every appearance after that, the character was voiced by J.G. Quintel, the series' own creator, the man who also gave his voice to Mordecai. Consider what that says. The person who built this world reached down and took this one minor floating side character for himself, and kept him, appearance after appearance, year after year. It is the kind of detail that fans treat as evidence of a quiet love, the creator holding on to something small because he did not want to let it go. For the first 3 seasons, that love expressed itself mostly through restraint. High Five Ghost rarely spoke. He was there, hovering, reacting, part of the furniture of the park. And only in Season 4 did the writing open up and hand him significant dialogue for the first time. This is the sort of thing that becomes legible only in hindsight, once the whole run is laid out and you can watch a background figure slowly acquire an interior. The fandom noticed. A character who earns his voice over years feels different from one who arrives fully formed. And the patience of that arc became something people admired without always being able to name why. The show did give him a family, and those glimpses turned out to matter enormously to how fans understood him. In the Season 2 episode See You There, the audience meets his father and his older brother, Low Five Ghost, who is a police officer. It is a small joke on the surface, a pun extended into a household, the High Five and the Low Five as brothers. But it also grounds High Five Ghost in a lineage, gives him a past and a place he came from. And for a character defined by so much blank space, a family is a powerful thing to hand the imagination. People took it and ran, building whole understandings of who he was around a father and a brother glimpsed in a single episode. Then there is the romance, which more than anything else transformed how the fandom regarded him. In the Season 5 episode The Postcard, High Five Ghost is reunited with a human love interest named Celia, after years of waiting for a postcard she had sent him from Prague. Consider the shape of that. A largely silent side character, given an unusually patient and romantic arc in the run, a man who waits years for a single piece of mail from a woman he loves. It reframes all that earlier quiet. The stillness was not emptiness. It could be read, in retrospect, as constancy, as a kind of devotion that did not need words, and the series honored it fully. In the epilogue of the finale, we see the two of them married, touring the world together as a DJ duo, and raising a son who is himself a ghost. Of all the futures the series sketched for its characters, his is among the happiest, and for many fans, that generosity toward a minor figure is exactly what made him unforgettable. But affection was only half of what the fandom built around him. The other half was a mystery the show never solved, and it is the reason he endures in theory threads and late-night arguments to this day. Regular show never resolved whether High Five Ghost was ever a living being who died and became a ghost, or whether he was simply born a ghost and never lived at all. His fundamental nature stays contradictory across the entire run. And the contradiction is not a matter of vague hints. There is real evidence on both sides. It depicts him as having been a ghost even as a baby, which strongly suggests he was born this way. A ghost from the very beginning. A creature who never had a mortal life to lose. That his son in the finale is also a ghost seems, at first, to support the same reading. A species that simply is what it is. And yet the show also, repeatedly, shows him visibly uncomfortable whenever death comes up in conversation. He flinches from the subject. He does not want to talk about it. Ask yourself why a being who was never alive, who never died, who was simply born a ghost, would carry that particular discomfort around death. The unease reads like the reaction of someone who did die. Someone for whom the subject is not abstract but personal. A wound rather than a curiosity. The two pieces of evidence do not fit together, and it never forces them to. It lets the contradiction stand. For a fandom, an unresolved contradiction is not a flaw. It is fuel. The question of whether Fives was born a ghost or died into one has no answer inside the text, which means it can be argued forever, and it has been. Every theory has to account for both the ghost baby and the discomfort with death, and no theory can fully win, because the show refused to pick a side. This is the strange gift the writers left behind. By never explaining him, they made him permanent. A fully explained character is finished. A contradictory one keeps generating conversation long after the final episode has aired. The affection took physical form as well. Fans of the show's merchandise point to a deluxe High Five Ghost plush that made it into official release. A soft little version of the character sized to sit easily in your hands. There is something fitting about that. A character made mostly of white space and simple shapes translates almost perfectly into a plush. And the fact that a minor side figure earned his own dedicated deluxe toy is itself a measure of where he landed in the series' hierarchy of favorites. Merchandise is a blunt instrument, but it does not lie about popularity. You do not manufacture a plush of a character nobody cares about. So the legacy of High Five Ghost rests on a kind of balance. On one side, warmth. A character who barely spoke yet was voiced by the series' own creator, who waited years for love and got a marriage, a touring life, and a son, who earned an object made soft and small enough to hold. On the other side, mystery, a nature the show never settled. A question about life and death that his own flinching keeps alive. The shorthand names, High Fives and Fives, carry both halves at once. The intimacy of a nickname and the smallness of a figure the audience decided, on its own, to love more than the writing ever demanded. And so the argument of the whole video settles into something quiet. It is High Five Ghost the show trusts most, because he asks for the least. He does not need a redemption arc, because he was never broken. He does not need to be the center of an episode to belong inside one. In a series obsessed with growing up, with the slow terror of adulthood arriving whether you are ready or not, he is the figure who has already made his peace with an ordinary life and found it full. The high five he offers is not a gesture toward greatness. It is a way of saying that you were here, and that being here beside someone was enough. Hold that against a show aimed at people afraid of becoming small. It suggests that a life measured in small kindnesses, in loyalty to a brother, and showing up for the people around you is not a lesser life at all. Everything the series builds toward, its cosmic scale and its impossible battles, keeps returning to that modest hand raised in the air. Picture him at the end of a long shift, the park emptying out, the sky going soft over the trees. Benson has gone home, the others have scattered, and there he is, drifting a little above the grass, waiting for one more hand to meet his own before the day closes. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.